Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Jaime Lee and I am a mixed media artist. Here on my channel I do time-lapse art videos. I talk about mixed media art and supplies, and I also do a little bit off the beaten path art videos talking about art conspiracies, paranormal art, and art Mandela effects. I hope that you are all well and healthy. I still have to be at work, so I am out and about daily, and it seems like there's actually quite a lot of people in my area still out as well, which is kind of concerning considering that we're going through this global pandemic. In my state, we have schools closed, we have universities closed, tattoo parlors and nail salons and hair salons. And most restaurants are doing no dine-in, they're just doing carry-out. We have put some stuff in place, but it seems to me like people are just kind of out everywhere every day, which is kind of scary to me. So I hope in your area that you're doing well. I hope that you're handling this situation as well as possible. Again, if you hear snoring, that is my puppy. In my last video, I discussed the pandemic and why I think art is important during times of crisis. If you would like to watch that video, I'll leave a link to it up above. For today's video, I wanted to do something a little lighter and more fun. So we're gonna talk about scary haunted paintings. Haha. Before I get started, I would like to point out two things. The first one is my candle back here. It's a candle called Ghostly Castle and it's by Spireside, and they're at spireside.com. And strangely enough, it does have a bit of like a castle-y, musty kind of scent to it, but it also has like almost like a powdery, flowery scent. It's actually kind of grown on me some. When I first smelled it, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. They have other candles that are unusual, like pirate themed and ghost themed and witch themed and, you know, cool stuff like that. So if you're into that, Spireside Candles is a fun place to get some candles from that are unusual and not your everyday Bath & Body Works candle. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I'm wearing this shirt here, and it is actually merch from an artist in my local area. The artist name that designed this t-shirt, his name is Austin Anderson, and he's in the Fort Smith, Arkansas area like I am, and he does merch like this. And I'll leave a link to his stuff down below just because I think his stuff is pretty cool if you want to go check it out. I did an art walk and he was one of the other artists that participated in it, and so I bought this t-shirt there. And then I saw him again at a coffee shop and told him how my daughter and I actually fought over this shirt because I wanted to wear it and she wanted to wear it, so he just gave us another shirt, which I thought was real cool of him. So he's a cool dude. Go check him out if you like this shirt. He has others that are similar to this one. A while back I talked about the world's most haunted painting, also known as the eBay haunted painting, or the actual title, The Hands Resist Him. I'll leave a link so you can go check out that video if you would like to. And that is kind of what started my whole obsession with haunted painting, paranormal art, that kind of thing. And The Hands Resist Him is the original story that led me down that whole rabbit hole. After I did that video, I thought, you know, seriously, how many more haunted paintings can there be? Turns out, a lot. So without further ado, here are 4 more haunted paintings, and added bonus, 1 haunted art museum. The first haunted painting I will be talking about is called The Anguished Man, and this is by far the creepiest looking painting on this list, and in fact one of the creepiest looking paintings I found while I was looking for this kind of stuff. It's a self-portrait by an anonymous artist. According to the info that I found, the story goes like this. Man paints portrait using his own blood mixed with paint. Not long after, man tragically commits suicide. Somehow, a woman ends up in possession of the painting. According to the story, a friend gave it to her. Would you accept this painting? Ugh, I wouldn't. Anyway, so she took the painting and it creeped her out, and she put it in her basement and tried to avoid it completely for years and years and years. And her grandson found the painting and became very fascinated with it, and when he asked her about it, she said no, I don't talk about it. That painting is cursed or haunted. Something's wrong with it. And she kind of described that there was a bad feeling associated with it. Screams and shrieks were heard around it. A general sense of uneasiness, a bad feeling. After her death, the painting becomes the possession of her grandson. His name is Sean Robinson, and he lives in Cumbria, England. Once he took possession of the painting, he had such trouble with it that he eventually put the painting in his own basement, and he currently refuses to sell the painting. What trouble did he have? Well, Sean wanted to hang it in his house, which his wife took great issue with, understandably. He immediately discovered that hanging it in his house was a stupid decision. The whole family, after he hung this painting, began having nightmares, and that was Sean, his wife, and his son. Loud screams sounded out of nowhere, doors opened in the night. There were ghostly lights, crying, and a dark, man-like figure that seemed to be just out of the corner of their eye. Sean even claims that his son was pushed down the stairs by unseen forces. He did record this painting with a video camera and posted these videos on YouTube. He wanted to see if he could capture some of the weird stuff that was happening around the painting. On the recordings, you can see the door closing on its own, a weird haze rising, ghostly lights or orbs, and the painting falling over on its own. Allegedly. Either the painting is cursed or this guy is an amazing con artist. The painting has been looked at by several paranormal groups. People have claimed that looking at the painting has given them nosebleeds or nausea or just a really uncomfortable sense. Sean, when he had the painting out in his house, talked about a reaction by his dog to the painting. When he kept the painting in the basement, his dog refused to go down in the basement. And then he actually wanted to hang it on the third floor of his house, I believe, in a spare bedroom. And so when he brought the painting out and put it up there, the dog refused to go up on the third floor. He also said that when the painting was hanging in his house, his wife had some very scary experiences that she attributes to something odd or paranormal, even though afterwards she tried to kind of say, well, maybe I was, having a bad dream or something like that. But she actually felt really uncomfortable around the painting and had an instance where she woke up and thought that her husband was in the bed with her, but when she turned and looked, it was somebody else entirely. And then she woke up in a panic and thought, well, maybe I was dreaming, maybe it was a bad nightmare. But at the time, she really thought that she had woken up next to a person that was a stranger. Once the painting was brought out of that third floor room and put back in the basement, the dog went back to not wanting to be in the basement, but apparently the supernatural happenings in the house kind of died down with it being stored in the basement. So the verdict is actually out on this painting still. The paranormal groups that have looked at it have said that they think there are spirits or some sort of entity tied to the painting itself. The guys from Weak and Weird say they think it's all just an elaborate hoax made up by this guy, Sean, and that he's a pretty good showman, and he has come up with this detailed and amazing haunted story that's probably not true. So is it haunted or is it a hoax? I guess I'll leave that for you to decide. The next painting on this list is called Pogo the Clown. Now I can tell what you're thinking right now, and let me tell you, if you have an aversion to clowns, especially clowns associated with serial killers, you might want to skip ahead. I'll leave a timestamp of when number 3 starts so that you can go there if you like. So, John Wayne Gacy. If you haven't heard of him, you're probably not obsessed with true crime like I am. John Wayne Gacy was a regular guy with a wife and a family who lived in suburban Illinois. He liked to dress up as Pogo the Clown and do charity and fundraising events. And he was known by many in his community as an upstanding citizen. And a lot of people also, would say that he was well liked. All was well until it was discovered that he was hiding the bodies of 33 men and boys underneath his house that he had tortured and murdered. Turns out this normal Joe Schmo was actually a brutal serial killer. living a double life. He was tried and convicted for his crimes, and while in prison before his execution, which took place in 1994, he took up oil painting and actually oil painted for about 14 years. He painted this painting of himself dressed as Pogo the Clown. Surprisingly, the painting was pretty sought after and has had a few different owners, yet everyone who owns it regrets it. They claim that Gacy's dark influence seems to be as much a part of the painting as the paint itself. One of the painting's owners was singer Nikki Stone, who bought it in 2001 for $3,000. He never even hung the painting, as a series of disturbing events happened after he bought it. His dog suddenly died, and his mother was diagnosed with cancer. Spooked, he sent the painting to a friend's house, whose neighbor then unexpectedly died in a car accident. Another friend offered to take the painting, but it wasn't in his possession long as he soon ended up committing suicide. Stone sold the painting after this. He believed the dark happenings were related to the painting. Several people who asked to see the painting while it was in his ownership immediately asked for it to be put away because they did not like looking at it. They got a really bad feeling from it, and they didn't like that dark feeling that they got from it. The Pogo the Clown painting even has another Hollywood connection. It is blamed for actor Johnny Depp's pathological fear of clowns. He owned it for a short time, but was so disturbed by it that he sold it almost immediately. But he kept his crippling fear that only materialized after he owned the painting.
Perfect.
The third painting on this list of haunted paintings is called The Dead Mother, Edvard Munch. You probably know the painting Munch is most well known for, The Scream. I covered that particular painting in my video on art Mandela effects. I'll leave a link if you'd like to check it out. But Munch created over 1,000 paintings in his lifetime, plus thousands of drawings and prints. Many reflected his melancholy outlook on the world, an outlook that he rightfully gained from a tragic and difficult childhood. At age 5, Edward watched his mother die from tuberculosis. Then throughout his childhood, he also lost his sister, his aunt, and his grandmother to the same disease. In fact, Edward himself almost died of the illness as well. Edward's father helpfully told his young son that his mother's and sister's deaths were divine punishments for their sins. As you can imagine, this gave Edward the fuel he needed to become the classic tortured artist. In 1900, he painted The Dead Mother. In it, we see a woman lying on a bed covered in bedclothes. A young girl stands in front of the bed looking directly at the viewer with her hands over her ears. People who have owned the painting claim that the young girl's eyes follow them when they move. This is one of the most compelling reasons people give for this painting being haunted. However, eyes in a painting that appear to follow you when you move is actually a common optical illusion with two-dimensional art. Many people also say that when you get close to the painting, the bedclothes of the mother move and you can hear them rustling. Now, that is not common, and it may be evidence that the painting is haunted after all. The painting currently resides at the Kunsthalle Bremen, an art museum in Bremen, Germany. And finally, we get to the fourth painting on this list, which is the portrait of Delphine Lalaurie. This portrait I can't even show to you since the current owners have it locked away and declined to discuss it or its whereabouts. However, the story behind the painting and a similar painting done by the same artist will have to suffice. The story of Delphine Lalaurie is a bit of an obsession of mine, and when her portrait came up on this list of haunted paintings, I was intrigued, to say the least. This past summer, my family and I actually vacationed in New Orleans, and I stood on the street outside the Lalaurie mansion on Rue Royale, also a site of great interest to people both interested in history and the paranormal. Delphine Lalaurie was alive from 1787 to 1849. She was a wealthy New Orleans socialite who was also a disturbed torturer and serial killer of the slaves who lived and died in her household. At the time her true nature came to light, she lived with her third husband, a doctor, in a large mansion located at 1140 Royal Street. A character based on Madame Lalaurie was played by Kathy Bates in the American Horror Story Coven season. But according to most accounts, the real Madame Lalaurie was worse than anything Kathy Bates could conjure up. So why the hell would anyone commission a portrait of her, especially in 1997, hundreds of years after her death. Well, new owners of the Lalaurie mansion were renovating it into apartments. And they asked a local artist, Ricardo Pistanio, to create a portrait of her to hang in the house. He actually went on to create several portraits of Madame Lalaurie, but this first portrait is the one that seems to have something sinister going on with it. As soon as it was hung in the Lalaurie mansion, people started complaining about paranormal activity. The mansion had a rather long, strange history anyways, but by all claims the activity seemed to ramp up after the portrait was hung. Many feel that the spirit of Lalaurie herself took a fancy to her portrait and decided to wreak havoc on the living through her portrait, just as she had done while she was alive. And I'm going to read you a short passage from the website The Paranormal Scholar, and it's talking about the activity that seemed to happen around this painting once it was hung. There have been reports of the painting moving on the wall by itself. On several occasions, it has been witnessed to rock so violently that the canvas freed itself of its fitting and tumbled to the floor. Residents of the apartments would describe feeling extremely unnerved around the painting of Lalaurie. They would hear echoing faint voices, feel cold touches on their skin, experience the strong smell of smoke, as well as report moved or missing personal possessions. One female tenant even claimed that the painting whispered to her directly as ghostly footsteps followed her around the apartment. The evil spirit of Madame Lalaurie, she stated, was tormenting her. The painting exuded such a darkness that it was eventually returned to the artist. And that is the end of the quote from The Paranormal Scholar. Is Delphine Lalaurie so evil that she wants to continue torturing the living long after her death? We may never know, but a glimpse into her twisted activities while she was alive may convince you. It all came to light after a fire broke out at the Lalaurie mansion on April 10th, 1834. Rumors had swirled for years before the fire that Madame Lalaurie mistreated her slaves. And a neighbor even claimed she witnessed from her stairway Madame Lalaurie chase a young slave girl to her death after she saw the girl fall from a balcony. But it wasn't until the fire that the people of New Orleans learned what a true monster Madame Lalaurie was. A crowd asked for the keys to the slave quarters so they could help anyone who may be trapped by the fire. And Madame flat out refused to give the keys up, and even did so in a rude manner, according to the New Orleans newspaper at the time. Undaunted, they broke the door down and were treated to the sight of such horror that when that newspaper, the New Orleans Bee, published the account of the events, it stated, quote, "Language is powerless and inadequate to give a proper conception of the horror which a scene like this must have inspired." So, according to published accounts of the fire itself, the family cook started the fire purposefully. She was found chained to the stove, alive and unapologetic for her actions, stating it would be better to burn to death than to continue a life of torture under Madame Lalaurie. But that wasn't even the worst of it. In the slave apartments, 7 slaves, and I use the quotes because these poor souls had been tortured so violently that they were barely alive. The 7 were chained, beaten, starved, forced to wear spiked collars that kept their heads at unnaturally positioned angles, and they were mutilated into agonizing and dehumanizing positions. 2 corpses were barely in the ground in the same room as the 7 tortured slaves. Immediate horror caused the townspeople to run Madame Lalaurie and her family out of town and loot and burn the mansion. It is said Lalaurie lived out the rest of her life in France and died there, but some speculate that her body was brought back to New Orleans for burial. Did her spirit return to her home and take up residence in the portrait of her likeness? We may never know. So that's the information I have on the 4 more haunted paintings that I found, but I do have one bonus item, and that is a haunted art museum. The Cincinnati Art Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. So there are several accounts online of hauntings at the Cincinnati Art Museum. At the DeWitt entryway in the Cincinnati Art Museum, a cheerful guard named Rosemary manned the entry for several years. One day, a coworker was confused by Rosemary's grumpy demeanor and mentioned it to other staff members because Rosemary's behavior was very uncharacteristic of her. Imagine his surprise and horror when he was informed that Rosemary was not actually at work that day because she had died the night before. The story of Rosemary's Grumpy Ghost is just one of several paranormal tales that take place in the Cincinnati Museum of Art. There's a clock in Galley 108 that occasionally chimes. Clocks that chime, no big deal, right? Well, except for this important fact, it no longer has any internal parts that would allow it to chime. Another tale takes place in the former studio, where every so often the motion detectors go off for no particular reason. You might chalk it up to a technical glitch or maybe a faulty system, or you might chalk it up to a ghost. The space was once the studio of an artist named Frank Duveneck, who also taught at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. And this was back in the 1800s. There is a rumor that one of his students fancied him, but he didn't feel the same way, so she hung herself from the very rafters where motion detectors seem to think something is moving. Mr. Duveneck seems to be a catalyst for ghostly activity, because there's another ghost story also in the Cincinnati Art Museum associated with him. His wife of only 2 years, Lizzie, died of pneumonia. Frank was heartbroken, and once he got to Cincinnati and started working for the museum, he created a bronze statue of her that rests in Gallery 110. But maybe rests isn't the right word, since staff of the museum claim that Lizzie haunts her peaceful looking effigy. So there you have it. There's 4 haunted paintings and 1 haunted art museum. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you like videos like this and would like to subscribe, I would love it if you would do so. I found many more examples of haunted paintings, but I didn't want this video to be super long. I know you guys need stuff to watch right now, but I didn't want to, make it too overly long. So if you would like to have another video like this one, I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know in the comments and let me know what you think about the haunted paintings in this video. Do you think they're really haunted? Do you think they're hoaxes? Do you think that people are seeing or hearing things that don't exist? I'd love to know what you think about the paintings that I've talked about in this video. And I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're not going too crazy being stuck inside wherever you're at. And if you do art or any other type of creative activity, please continue to do those things, because I think it's really important right now to, kind of keep our minds off the crazy situation that's going on in the world right now. So thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Bye!